Yeah, well, that's a bit of the issue in Ohio currently is part of the motor voter bill, and these registrations don't match up, and who's going to make sure they match up, and that I mean that's the issue. What the core of that really is what I consider state-sponsored caging in Ohio, where the Secretary of State mails letters out. What was it? I think it's 60 or 90 days or whatever, some fairly close to the election to verify if you are still registered at that address. Well, just because you're not at that address, that gets into, like, for instance, the foreclosure scandal that we heard about. Right. But doesn't necessarily mean that you're no longer a registered voter. Maybe you moved, maybe you sold your house, maybe you haven't changed your registration. Certainly, as a voter, you should stay on top of that stuff. But I think that like the foreclosure thing, that's geared towards a state-sponsored caging operation that's geared towards knocking down their eligibility, going into a high turnout election. A low turnout election is one thing. High turnout election is something else altogether.
Have you heard of any other caging besides the foreclosure caging?
Well, the foreclosure caging is brilliant. It's brilliant, actually, because
it was found illegal though by the judge.
Yeah, and certainly here in Maryland, the Attorney General made I can't remember what it was. It was some kind of decree about some kind of statement that you still have the right to vote. But if you think about it, just on a tactical level, it costs money to do caging because you have to send a first-class letter.
Right.
The foreclosure list allows you to build the challenge list without the expense, because you don't have to go spend 47 cents, 55 cents, whatever per letter to build that list. You just now get it from the state. And I don't know, you said it was found illegal by a judge, but I think that was in Michigan, right. So, but doesn't mean that they can't pursue those in Ohio or whatever other states. And I think the only reason it came up is because
foreclosure story has played out in more than one state. I remember hearing about Michigan, but are you aware of it being played out elsewhere?
Well, again, you never know where it's being played out. I think in Michigan it played out because you had a guy who couldn't contain himself and frankly shot off his mouth, and I think a lot of
I thought it was stupid that he said that, but
yeah, I mean, I bet he took a lot of heat from people like, you're not supposed to talk about these things. So that doesn't, just because they caught it in Michigan doesn't. Now I have no knowledge that it is going on. All I can tell you is that it's a brilliant cost-saving tactic.
Now I have another question about the Chamber of Commerce. Have you run into the Chamber of Commerce bankrolling attacks on Democrats and coordinating that with the RNC or?
Well, the Chamber of Commerce is one of those groups, and both parties have them, that you rely on them doing certain things, whether it be Americans for Tax Reform, the Chamber of Commerce, the NRA, whoever it is on the Republican side. On the Democratic side, it's going to be Sierra Club, unions, whatever it might be. By coordinated, if you mean that they're actually sitting down and sharing polling information with the RNC, I imagine they're not doing that because there's some legality, there are legal issues there. But look, I mean that's within their rights. They're an association of people from around the country. They have certainly a First Amendment right to go out.
I just wondered if you were aware of any coordination directly.
No, I'm not personally aware of. But I'm the last guy to ask. I'm not. I'm no longer a believer in organized party politics. But so they don't tell me anything anymore.
Okay, go ahead, Paul.
well, that's actually sort of a follow-on to that in the sense of because were you very aware of the movement? I mean, the whole what I think of as Karl Rove's agenda, and perhaps what I think of as the corporate RNC agenda of gaming the judicial system, the way it's playing out is Karl Rove said, and to any state that has an electable Supreme Court, that it's
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, it was an objective to win control of as many state legislatures as possible. Once you,
Legislatures, but how about the judiciary?
well, yeah, no, and I'll speak to that in a minute. On the legislatures, it makes a ton of sense because that you then control the redistricting process. On the judicial, it's the same. I think it's the same rationale. I personally never worked in any states where you had that dynamic, but it's the same mindset. It's the same tactical and strategic approach of if you can control the beast, then you have great influence. So I mean, and that's an admitted tactic, I think, down in Alabama. Absolutely. I mean, that was a big part of Karl Rove's prominent rise in the Republican Party. So, but I also think that you saw the charge levied by the Obama campaign on Friday, which had to do with the comparison of the Acorn scandal and conspiracy. That was the allegation that they made. There was conspiracy between the White House, the Department of Justice, and even the McCain campaign and the RNC, just as there was precedent for such conspiracy charges going back to the U.S. Attorney scandal. So that was a pretty potent response, I thought, by the Obama campaign.
So, in other words, they were saying by trying to get the FBI to investigate Acorn that this is similar to the intimidation that they used against U.S. attorneys for not going after Acorn. And you saw David Iglesias come out a couple days ago, too, and say that it's basically a redo. I can never say the word, but politicizing the Department of Justice is the charge that the Obama campaign made. And it's an interesting charge because there's some basis there. Yeah.
Because you have the U.S. Attorney scandal. So politically, it's a very smart thing to do. Also, it begins to lay the groundwork and send the message of, look, if you're going to use this as a way to challenge the results, you're potentially opening or keeping open those cans of worms you'd rather go away. Because, look, do you want to be on the receiving end of a DOJ investigation into this very matter if there's an Obama presidency? So if you're sitting at DOJ or the White House, you need to think about the fact that you're no longer going to have the protection of those institutions in a couple of months. So you may be vulnerable. You may want to back off.
If you were advising the Democrats after assuming Obama wins and they get a fairly substantial bump in the Senate and congressional numbers, and if you were advising the Democrats on what changes they should make to help to protect elections in the future, to outlaw some of the things that you've been talking about, what would you suggest?
Well, I certainly think on the, which is and you all know more than this than I do, but how you deploy new technologies into the field. That's certainly I would set some kind of rigid, rigorous testing process before you stick these new technologies out into the polling places. Regulate it. I mean, that's the theme of our economic meltdown right now is regulation versus deregulation. So I think that would certainly be one, and I think heavy criminal penalties can act as a deterrent. If you know that you're looking at some time incarceration and fines, you may think twice about what you're going to do.